Okay, here we go to this budget business. Like Silvio Dante said on an episode of Sopranos, every time I try to get out, they suck me back in. Every time I try to leave, they pull me back in. By the way, what was Pelosi talking about when what did she say that supported the big suck? What is she talking about with the budget business? Pelosi actually embraced the suck. What is she talking about? Anyway, let's start the ABC network this morning on ABC. This is a correspondent, Taman Bradley, reporting on Boehner's criticism of conservative groups for their criticism of the budget.
Republican leadership angered the Tea Party Republicans and the far right, who want to cut spending and address the country's soaring debt.
It just seems like the Republican Party is consumed with eliminating any conservative influence inside the party whatsoever.
House Speaker John Boehner took on the Tea Party and outside groups who've undermined his leadership the past couple of years.
There just comes to a point when some people step over the line. You know, when you criticize something and you have no idea what you're criticizing, it undermines your credibility.
This was the first big battle between the Republican leadership and the Tea Party since the government shutdown. For many veteran GOP lawmakers, that 16-day ordeal was a turning point.
Make no mistake about it. They're scared to death of it. That's exactly right. But, you know, Boehner keeps talking about people you criticize something, you have no idea what you're criticizing. We all knew what was in it. Everybody knew what was in the budget deal. They're the ones that told us. Every day there's a new little bit of information disseminated in it. It wasn't any big mystery what was in this thing. And it turns out that what was being criticized by others was accurate. So I don't know what Boehner's talking about on that score. But this quote of mine, that audio soundbite they got, it just seems the Republican Party is absurd. They could have pulled that from a year ago. I stayed away from this, and I told you all why. Because I'm not going to get sucked in. Speaking of embracing the suck, I'm not going to get sucked in by this soap opera business going on every day. This was a fait accompli, what was going to happen here. Let's face it. We talked about this at great length yesterday in a unique way, I think, about Washington, how it's constituted, why it's constituted, the wealth that's being amassed. There's nobody there that wants to shrink that town. There are very few, when I say nobody, very few people in Washington, certainly in elective office, who think there's a crisis. You know, that is the big dividing line, folks. You and I, you people that call yourselves Tea Party people, you came into existence. You decided to enter this fray because of all of Obama's spending. I mean, and it was massive in this first couple, 3 years, and all of that new debt and the Obamacare. And in 2010, it reached a head, and this is out of control, and they're spending your future, your kids, your grandkids' future. They are spending already the taxes that would be collected and then some from people not even born yet. And so the Tea Party came into existence because, as far as they were concerned, this is a crisis. We've reached a tipping point. But inside the Beltway, folks, the Washington establishment does not think there's a crisis at all. The debt is not a big deal. It's no different as a percentage of GDP than it's ever been. They'll tell you that. The size of the debt is irrelevant. The percentage of GDP is all that matters, and it's not that bad compared to the recent past. So there's no big deal. Spending, no big deal. Debt, no big deal. There isn't any crisis. That's the big dividing line. You and me think the country is in peril. Inside the Beltway, there is hardly anybody who thinks that. And certainly in both the Democrat and Republican Party establishments, you will not find that as anywhere near a majority opinion. That is a very, very small group of people who believe that. And it is that, among other things, but that's one of the big ones that is causing the fissure between the Republican establishment and the majority of people in its base. This is just not acceptable. We don't have the money. We don't, and then they insult us with what they say. Well, there's $42 billion of deficit. $42 billion of deficit reduction, a $4 trillion budget. There isn't any deficit reduction. So then they insult your intelligence by telling you they're cutting the budget, they're cutting spending, and they're not. In fact, what they did was lock in spending for Obamacare. Now, I asked the question yesterday. I'll pose the question again. Hypothetical. Take your pick. If we had a Republican president and a Republican House and a Republican Senate, do you think the Republican Party as it exists today would repeal Obamacare? And a lot of people tell you no. We're not going to go to the trouble. Not going to go to the hassle of doing that. We don't have an alternative. We'll just make this work. Too much trouble. Too much work. What do you mean repeal Obamacare? We can't. It's the law of the land. The law of the land? I thought the sequester was the law of the land, but that didn't hold up very long. The sequester was the law of the land, too, but that's, for the most part, been given up. Those cuts. So they don't think there's a crisis, folks. This is no different than when the national debt was $6 trillion and the budget deficit was $300 billion a year, and the percentage of GDP that the debt represented was 20%, 18 to 22. No big deal, same thing. The numbers don't matter. The percentages are all that matters, and we're fine. There's no crisis. In fact, those people tell you the federal government can never run out of money. It's not possible. They have a printing press. I had them tell me this. Rush, you say that we don't have the money. Yes, we do. We can print it. We can borrow it. We're never going to run out of money. There's no, amongst people in the establishment, both parties, there's no, how to put this, pressure, concern. There's no urgency about balancing anything. Now, they'll talk now and then near elections as though there is, but after that, it goes by the wayside. And it was just talk, just like all the votes on defunding Obamacare. There were 100 of them, but they were meaningless. When the time came to really do something about it, the people that actually stood up and said, okay, time to do it, were tarred and feathered and destroyed and called terrorists and hostage takers and ransom demanders and so forth. So it really boils down to the establishment doesn't think that there's anything even out of the ordinary going on. This debt, percentage-wise, it's nothing unusual. We're not threatened by it. And we can borrow and print all we need anyway. I don't know what you're worried about. You people are panicked. You Tea Party people, you're panicked over nothing. But the real truth of the matter is that there isn't any sentiment whatsoever amongst the establishment in Washington to shrink that town, to lessen its role in people's lives. Not really. You know, all the money that's there is somebody else's. This is the thing that irritates me. Washington, D.C. and the suburbs have become one of the wealthiest enclaves by zip code in the country. And the money that everybody has there is somebody else's first. That nothing is really produced there, not by government. Now, you do have some tech companies and others in suburbia, branch offices. But for what we're talking about here, government, the real source of wealth, where all the money ends up before it gets dispersed, there's nothing produced. It's just money taken from other people. So the wealth that exists there is the result of redistribution and taxation, confiscation. I mean, you know, when Obama was trying to kill the Bush tax cuts, we were told by everybody that the deficit was a matter of national defense. You know, when the Democrats are trying to destroy Republican agenda items, then the deficit's a horrible thing, and the debt is a dangerous thing, and it threatens national security. It threatens national defense. Hillary told us that. Obama told us that. When they end up in charge of it, it becomes moral, all of a sense. All the debt, all the spending becomes compassionate and moral. And if there are any Republicans who speak against it, then here come the usual racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, war on women, mean-spirited extremists. And the Republicans always cower when such allegations are made. In this case, I'm telling you what the real animating thing was fear of another shutdown. I will tell you one more time. The Republican Party establishment is embarrassed of the pro-life element of its base. And I'm not going to go through all the stories that offer evidence or proof because I've done it I don't know how many times, and you've heard them all. But you know it's true. The Republican Party thinks a sizable percentage of its base is really fringe wackos, kooks, if you will. And they associate that group with the people who want to shut down government, which to them is just the kookiest idea in the world. Why would you want to shut down government? The government is the center of the universe. Shutting down the government to these people is the equivalent of extinguishing the sun. You don't do it. Everybody would die. The Republicans believe that the vast majority of Americans get up every day and are absorbed totally with what government's doing and how government's taking care of them and how government's giving them benefits. And then if somebody comes along and shuts the government down, people start getting upset and they blame somebody for it because their lives go to hell because the government shut down. Republicans don't want to get blamed for that. They will allow the Democrats to do anything rather than the government be shut down. And the Republicans have given up any leverage that they might want to use down the road by signaling this. By admitting, by signaling to the Democrat Party they are scared to death and they will do anything to avoid a government shutdown, the Democrats know they can always win and have their way. And so the Republican, you got sound bites, got them coming up. You'll hear this. You will hear Republicans just cower in fear and anger over the possibility that you freaks, you Tea Party people might engineer another shutdown, and that would be the end of the Republican Party. You're destroying them. You just don't understand. I got to take a time out now. We'll come back and continue. It's Open Line Friday, which means we always try to take a few more calls than we do normally. So we throw that in, too.